Alright, we're going to do a Mage Knight character tier list. We're going to be doing this for playing with 3 to 4 people competitively. I think that changes a lot from solo mode. I've seen some reviews, some tier lists of solo, and hearing people talk about playing these characters in solo, and they've come to a completely different conclusion than I have, playing mostly 3 to 4 player games. Played a lot of 3 to 4 player games since the game released, and more recently, in the past couple of years, played a lot of Mage Knight, and pretty much always played with 3 to 4 people and playing full length games. With that being said, I think the biggest difference from solo and competitive is probably movement. We typically don't play with PvP because it gets a little, those rules are a little crazy. But I think the big difference is probably movement. The fast characters just kind of run out ahead, and they reveal the map to the other characters and allow the slower characters to optimize their movement and not have to waste movement opening map tiles to see a bunch of desert in front of them during the day and having to turn around. Not having to do that and not having to force your way through desert with the slower characters really helps you optimize a lot. Also, when you're playing with 3 to 4 people, the round is ended by the first player who runs out of cards. So if you're playing really loose with your cards and not playing with card advantage in mind, you are going to just have less turns than the people you're playing against, and that's typically pretty bad. You want more turns so you can use your cards more efficiently and to use all of your cards efficiently. You don't want to be leaving cards in your deck on the table, but you also don't want to be just burning through your cards playing them sideways. I think that changes up quite a bit as well. So with that, we'll start with Tovac. Tovac is pretty much everything about him is about average. Above average, his starting actions are pretty good. He's got a better block, and when you're playing with the expansion units, block is a little bit more important because they have those vampire cards that double their health when they hit you. That's generally not fun. It makes it pretty hard to kill units, and when you're running in and you're not able to fully block them and you're not able to fully kill them, it makes it really suck for some of these characters that just try to run in and get hit and then kill them on the crackback. Tovac gets a little bit better since he can actually block things a little bit more effectively than other people, so that really helps him with the expansion. And I'm going to throw him in B tier. He's got some really good skills, and his starting actions are generally pretty decent. The ice block, having the 3 block can save you a card, and getting like the +1 block against certain units can save you a card, and then having the ice block sometimes can save you a bunch of cards or just save you from getting hit. And then the improved improvisation, you really have to be mindful to use this card to where it actually does something. Using it for 2 movement or 4 movement, if you end up using it for 3 or 5, you're not really getting a benefit there. So you really want to be careful with how you use your cards with Tovac, and so you can save some of that card advantage. And then just some of his skills like cold swordsmanship, just getting 2 attack every single turn, can be very, very strong in the long run. And I think a lot of his other skills are about average or on par with what you would think a skill should do, what an average skill should do. And for that, he's pretty solidly in B tier. Again, not having a lot of good movement stuff doesn't hurt him as much here when other people are revealing the path to him and revealing the good objectives for him. Next up, we'll do Goldyx. Now, I've seen Goldyx ranked pretty highly in S tier or A tier as being one of the better units for solo play. Actually, probably not S tier, but an above average character for solo play. And frankly, with Goldyx, we have a guy who really likes playing Goldyx, and Goldyx never performs. Goldyx has always felt like a disappointment. He always lags behind a bit. It's really hard to have a good game with Goldyx, and I don't think anyone has ever won a game playing Goldyx, actually. He just, for something in competitive is holding him back. He just doesn't make it. Maybe it's his Crystal Joy, not being able to really use that card efficiently when there's just not enough time to do it, or he's just too slow trying to get to objectives and clear them. He maybe just needs a little bit too much setup and prep. Goldyx, he really struggles. We've really seen him struggle. He has, in my opinion, a lot of bad skills that cause him to really, struggle in terms of power. And, I could almost put him in D tier. But it feels like there's potential there with Goldyx, so I'm going to leave him in C tier because it always feels like he's hanging in the game, but he just never seems to be able to get the job done. Next up is Norowas. Norowas is one of those characters where he can just do unfair things. Some of those tier 3, tier 4 units are just have really stupid abilities, and Norowas can just use those abilities over and over again and really push advantage in the late game. He's really strong, and his starting actions are still good in the early game. Getting the free fame and reputation is great. Getting to reuse those, even just peasants is great. Or getting the magic familiars can be pretty strong with him. He just does a lot of, he can do a lot of unfair things. But, he's a little inconsistent. In my opinion, he's got a couple skills that I'd say are probably below average that you can kind of get stuck with. There's no re-rolling in competitive. Once you start playing, you're playing. If you run in and get wall-upped, or there's no good units that show up, there's no re-rolling, there's no restarting because you got his bad skills. You're stuck with what you get. So sometimes some of these characters can feel worse than they maybe would in solo. But overall, he can do some really stupid things and just win the game. So for that, he's A tier. Next up is Bravar. He's one of these movement guys that people don't really like him in solo, and I don't think he really gets any better in competitive. He's got some movement stuff, but it's not too useful. His skills, he's got some cool healing stuff, but for some reason he just doesn't have really anything else. It seems people have a little bit of a hard time getting Bravar going. He's never really felt too OP, too strong. You can do some cool stuff with him, but for some reason, he's another one of these characters that kind of struggles to get there. I think the movement not being as useful hurts him. And for that reason, I'm going to leave him in C tier. He's never really done anything exceptional. He's never done anything that feels too OP. The healing, the consistent healing with him is pretty good, but other than that, he's never felt like super strong to me. Next up is Wolfhawk. Another one of these characters, it's a movement character. And if you're just going to open up the map for Tovac or Arythe and let them, run to the cool objectives first and use their movement efficiently, they're going to do a lot when they're not wasting turns moving. When they can go from objective to objective, they're going to play really strong. So having a character that's good at moving around is great for solo, but it's not as good here. The skills, again, they're lacking a little bit in power. And it's just nothing really has felt truly unfair with Wolfhawk that comes specifically from her kit. So for that, C tier. Again, one of those characters that's always felt maybe disappointing or always been one of the underperforming characters whenever we play. And then Krang. I'm going to put him at the top of C tier. Krang has some cool kit. He's got a really cool kit, really interesting stuff, but I think it hurts him too much. The Ruthless Coercion, a really cool skill to get the ball rolling with the units, but if you lose the units, it makes it really hard to replace them when you're constantly getting your influence tanked, and the green units that pop up are going to be getting killed by everyone else, so sometimes it can be hard to get it back up. And, it only works on level 1 and level 2 units, so you don't get to do unfair things like Norowas does with it. You can build up an army of good level 2 units, but, they start to fall off later in the game, and when you have that lower reputation, it makes it harder to get them back later in the game as well. And he has Savage Harvesting. It's a great skill to snowball with. But I think the problem with it is it's a little bit, uses too many cards. So you end up pitching your whole hand for crystals, and then you end up being the one calling the end of the round, or people are able to fully use all their cards to their full potential, not just discarding them for a crystal. I think that's probably bad card advantage. So the Savage Harvesting, well, you can set up really cool plays with it and really get the ball rolling and start snowballing with Krang. If you don't start snowballing early with Krang, he's gonna fall off. And then last but not least, Arythe. Arythe is broken. She is not fun to play against in competitive. Her skill that lets her take 2 wounds from herself and give 1 to each other player. She can take 2 wounds off and then give 1 to the 2 closest people next to her. That is just brutal. It's not fun to play against when you're the one near Arythe and you're constantly getting wounds shoved at you. It really hurts and it's really unfair. And she's just the best character for taking wounds. Her starting ability, her starting actions are really strong as well. Mana pull is just broken. There's never not black mana when you're playing with 4 people. It's just an insane card. It's a mana draw that's way better. And her other action, Battle Versatility, is again really strong. Siege attack, ranged attack, fire attack, it does everything. It's just way too flexible. It's really hard for Arythe to not have a really good game. It's almost impossible. Almost all her skills are above average. She has some really strong skills. Her maybe one skill that's bad is like the influence skill, but everyone's influence skill feels kind of bad. So with her, she's just too strong. And honestly, we don't play with Arythe anymore because we find her to be too much better than the other characters. So we've kind of banned her. We don't play with Arythe. If you want to give someone a handicap who's maybe not as good at the game or learning the game, let them play Arythe. But other than that, we don't like playing with Arythe. We think she's just way too strong. And then last but not least, Mage Knight. Mage Knight is an S tier game. You should play it.